she didn't have any shoes. Put it that way. It was January. She didn't have any shoes. We couldn't find her shoes. Nobody knew where her shoes were. Not only did she didn't have any shoes, she didn't have a jacket, right? So I brought her to this party, and I'm responsible for her. And so she's drunk as a skunk. I'm also drunk, but I'm a functional alcoholic, right? So we get pulled over in a cul-de-sac where everything looks the same. This is before GPS days, right? This is where you have to ask somebody for direction. How many of you are that old where you remember having to ask for directions? How many of you have had the unfortunate circumstances where you've had to ask the police officer who pulled you over how to get home? Oh man, it was a mess. We got pulled over in this cul-de-sac, snow everywhere, and I was behind I don't remember who it was. I was behind whatever the situation was. I think I tried to get around a car, or oh no, I was at a T-bone intersection. That's what it was, and I didn't know if I should go right or I should go left because it looked exactly the same. It was little boxes made of ticky-tacky, and they all looked just the same. And I had no idea which way I was supposed to go. And it was snow everywhere, and every house had a roof and doors and windows, and they were all white. And they all had 2.5 cars in the driveway, or whatever a nuclear family is. They all had that stuff, right? And then, so I'm at the T-bone intersection, and I looked probably exactly as many times as I did in the previous example. And then I looked one last time this way. And I'm like observing my friend, who is just like on a loop. She's like on a 5-minute loop. Like, I don't know how are we gonna go to the, you know, like not knowing where she's at and just repeating herself. 5-minute goldfish. And I just looked this way for too long, and I just assumed because it was the middle of the night that nobody was coming from this way. So I just started to go, and there was a cop there. Which the cop would have, you know, they weren't coming fast, but like, so they were coming, and I had to stop and like whiplash myself. And then, of course, I pulled out. They passed. I pulled out. Lights go on. I'm like, oh, I didn't really do anything wrong other than I almost pulled out in front of the police officer, but I stopped. That's not illegal. And then, so I kept driving. And then another cop came from the other way, and they turned the lights on. That other cop turned around, and now I'm like, I'm in a cop sandwich. It's arguably the worst sandwich, a cop sandwich. And so the officers come up to the side of the car. And I'm just like, oh man. So I was actually kind of happy because they came up to the passenger side, and I was like, oh great, they'll see how messed up she is, and they'll observe how responsible that I'm being, and I'll, you know, tell them the truth, which is I'm just trying to get her home. I'm not going to tell them I had 10 Jello shots. And then so they're asking her questions, and then she's goldfish, so she's like, I don't know, and then whatever. So she's talking to female officer, and then there's another officer over here. So again, I was using that back of my throat voice because I could see, because of the humidity coming off my breath, I could see where my breath was going. And then so if you just talk out of the back of your throat, it doesn't throw a bunch of wind, and I can see that it was just kind of little fluffy clouds right in front of my face. Wasn't really going out the window. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. And then the officer was like doing the officer trick. So where are you coming from? Where are you going to? And I'm like, I'm coming from yada, yada, yada address on yada street, and I'm going to XY street over and wherever. And he's like, okay, what's the story with her? I'm like, I don't know. I brought her to the party. I couldn't find her. I found her locked in a room. She didn't have any shoes. I don't know where her jacket is. I'm just trying to get her home. And then he's like, okay, so where are you coming from? I'm like, coming from XYZ street, and I'm going to XYZ street. Oh, okay. So I passed they asked me a bunch of questions multiple times, and it was the same, so I was like laser focused, because I don't know if you're about to get a DUI, how laser focused you are, how all of a sudden, it doesn't matter how drunk you are, if you're in a situation like anger, extreme anger, snaps you out of it. Like if you're on your way from Buffalo, New York, and because you couldn't get into the Canadian border because you had a resisting arrest on your record, and in Canada they look at that as a violent crime, and they won't let you into Canada. and then it pisses you off, and you're 6 hours from home, and it'll snap you out of it, right? That type of thing. So there's situations where it'll snap you out of being drunk, or at least it'll make you think. You'll be just pumping, just full of cortisol and adrenaline, and it'll pump you out of being drunk, right? So I'm talking to the cops, and they're just like, my original question was, how do I get back to the highway? Because that's how I just changed the subject, right? So it went from like me being potentially drunk to I just needed to know how to get home because I need to take this girl home who she's hammered. I'm fine, right? And then so the officer was like, all right. So anyway, you're gonna go down the street to the end of the cul-de-sac, and I was just like, whoa, white noise. I'm not even listening to what he's saying. I'm just so grateful he's not pulling me out of the car right now. And he never asked me to get out of the car, and I was like, oh, thank God. And then so I drove like down the street, and then I didn't know where I was going again. So I was just like, oh no, what if it happens again? And they're gonna be like, what's wrong with your brain that you don't know, you don't understand language? I just told you how to get home. All right, get out of the car, right? This has been a clip from our Sober live stream and live chats hosted for 2 hours every Friday and Sunday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern, right here, only on YouTube.